My mom didn't wander off. That was the first thing my brother said, and the first thing I knew wasn't true. She left early, he told me on the phone. His voice was calm. Too calm. She gets confused sometimes now. You know that. Don't make it a big deal. Don't make it a big deal. He said it like this had already been decided. Like the story was finished before I even got there. I didn't argue with him on the phone. Not yet. I just drove. The whole way there, I kept replaying the sentence in my head, turning it over, trying to make it fit my mother. It didn't, even after her diagnosis. My mom was careful. She labeled everything. She wrote notes to herself in thick black marker. She lined up her pills in exact rows, with times written next to them. She double-checked the locks before bed. She never left the house without her purse. She always wore the same pair of soft gray shoes when she stepped outside. Careful wasn't something she used to be. It was something she had become, because she knew what was happening to her, and she was trying to hold on to control for as long as she could. So when I pulled into her driveway and saw the front door closed, nothing about that worried me. Not yet. It wasn't until I stepped inside that something shifted. The house felt wrong. Not messy. Not empty. Paused, like everything had been left. Mid-motion. The air felt still, like no one had moved through it in days. "Mom?" I called out. My voice sounded louder than it should have. No answer. I walked into the kitchen slowly, not because I expected her to be there, but because I needed to see something normal. Something that matched the story I had been given. Instead, I saw her shoes. Right by the table, placed neatly side by side. The gray ones. The ones she wore every single time she stepped outside. I stopped walking, because if she had left the house, she would have been wearing them. That was the first crack in his story. The second was her purse. It sat on the chair slightly open, her wallet inside, her keys inside. I picked it up and checked anyway, just to be sure. Everything was there, nothing missing. The third was her phone, still plugged into the charger by the sink. Screen dark. No missed calls. No signs that she had taken it with her. 3 things. Shoes, purse, phone, all still in the house. My mom didn't go anywhere without those 3 things. Not before the diagnosis. Not after. I stood there for a the moment, just looking at them, like if I stared long enough, they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. "Mom?" I called again, louder this time. Nothing. I checked the living room. Empty. The bedroom. The bed was made, but not recently. The sheets had that slight looseness that comes from sitting, not sleeping. The bathroom. Her toothbrush was dry. Everything pointed to the same thing. She hadn't been here. Not recently. And she hadn't left on her own. That thought came quietly. It didn't hit all at once. It settled in slowly, like something I didn't want to fully recognize yet. I walked back into the kitchen. That's when I noticed the calendar. It hung on the wall next to the fridge. She updated it every night. Every single night. I knew that because she used to call me sometimes just to tell me she had checked it twice. Just in case, she would say. Every day was marked. Meals, appointments, medication, times. Little notes reminding her to call me. Her handwriting wasn't perfect anymore, but it was consistent, steady in its own way. Until it wasn't. The last 3 days were blank. Not messy. Not crossed out. Just empty. Like time had stopped. My chest tightened. Because my mom didn't forget the calendar. She depended on it. If 3 days were blank, then she hadn't been the one holding the pen. I pulled out my phone and called my brother again. He picked up on the second ring. "She didn't leave," I said. Before he could speak, a pause. Then a quiet exhale. "You're overthinking this. Her shoes are here. She forgets things. Her purse is here. Another pause. Her phone is here." Silence. For a second, I thought he might finally hear what I was saying. Then he spoke again. Lower this time. "I've got it handled." The same sentence. Exactly the same. Like he had rehearsed it. Like it was The only thing he was willing to say. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not panic, not fear, something colder. Because I realized I wasn't just trying to find my mom anymore. I was trying to understand why my own brother didn't want me to look. Band. Chait Dung Loon. D. Dung Hoi Light Min. I didn't call him again after that. Not because I believed him, because I didn't, but because I needed. Something he couldn't talk his way out of. Something solid. Something that didn't depend on his version of events. I stayed in the house longer than I should have, not moving much. Just watching, listening, trying to notice what didn't belong. That's when the silence started to feel different. Not empty. Controlled. Like whatever had happened here had been cleaned up just enough to look normal. I opened the drawers in the kitchen again. Slowly this time. The utensils were in place. The dishes were stacked neatly, but the cabinet above the sink felt lighter than it should have. I reached up and opened it. The folders were gone. Not all of them, just the ones that mattered. Insurance documents, bank envelopes, anything with numbers attached to it. Everything else was still there. Old receipts, menus, random notes. Whoever had taken them knew exactly what they were looking for. That wasn't confusion. That was selection. I closed the seat cabinet and stood there for a moment. Because that was the second shift. The first had been doubt. This was direction. Something had been done. On purpose. I walked back into the bedroom. Opened her nightstand. Her medication was still there. 3 days' worth untouched. Not scattered. Not dropped. Untouched. That meant she hadn't been here to take them. And if she hadn't taken them, she hadn't been here. At least not for the last 3 days. I sat on the edge of her bed, and that's when the thought finally formed completely. She didn't leave. She was taken. Word felt too strong at first. Too dramatic. But nothing else fit. And the longer I stayed in that room, the more certain it became. I pulled out my phone again. This time, I didn't call him. I called the bank. The number was written on one of the old statements I still remembered. I had helped her organize everything a few years ago, before things started to slip. Before the brother took over most of the important decisions. The woman on the phone sounded polite, professional, careful. "I'm sorry," she said after I explained. "I can't release any detailed information without authorization. I expected that, so I didn't ask for details. I asked a different question. Has there been any recent activity on her accounts?" There was a pause, a small one, but enough. "Yes," she said. My chest tightened. "How recent?" "Within the last 48 hours. That didn't line up. My mom had been gone longer than that. "What kind of activity?" Another pause. Then her voice lowered slightly. "Transfers. Plural." I closed my eyes. Because that word changed everything. Transfers meant intention. It meant someone knew what they were doing. And it meant access. Only a few people had that kind of access. And one of them had just told me not to make this a big deal. I thanked her and ended the call. For a moment, I just sat there, letting it settle. Because now this wasn't just about finding my mom. It was about understanding what had been done with her life while she was gone. I stood up and walked back into the kitchen, looked at the shoes again. Still in the same place, perfectly aligned, like they were waiting. That was when the anger started. Not loud, not explosive, just steady. Because someone had decided something for her. Something she didn't choose. And they had done it quietly, carefully, in a way that almost worked. Almost. I picked up my keys, walked out of the house, locked the door behind me. And this time, I didn't feel like I was leaving. I felt like I was stepping into something. Because now I had two things I didn't have before. A pattern and a direction. And for the first time since that call, I knew where to go next. Teep, I didn't call him before I drove over. If I had, he would have had time. Time to explain. Time to adjust. Time to prepare. I didn't want that. I wanted to see him the way he was, before he knew what I knew. His house looked exactly the same. As always, clean, organized, predictable. Nothing about it suggested anything was wrong. That bothered me more than anything else, because something was very wrong, and he was living like it wasn't. I knocked once. He opened the door almost immediately, like he had been standing there, waiting. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You shouldn't be here." Not angry, not surprised, just certain. Like this was a boundary I wasn't supposed to cross. "I called the bank," I said. His expression didn't change. "They said there's activity." Still nothing. Not even a blink. That was when I felt it clearly for the first time. He wasn't confused. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't trying to figure anything out. He already knew everything. He stepped aside slightly. "Come in." I walked past him. The house smelled like cleaning product. Fresh. Too fresh. The living room was spotless. No papers, no clutter, no signs of stress. No signs of someone dealing with a missing parent. "You're overreacting," he said behind me. "She's fine." I turned to face him. "Where is she?" There it was. The pause. Small. Controlled. But real. "I moved her somewhere safer." Moved. He said it like it was a simple decision. Like changing her location didn't change. "Anything else? A facility?" "Yes." "Which one?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then he gave me a name. It sounded clean. Professional. Completely unfamiliar. That was enough. "If she's safe," I said, "why didn't you tell me?" His jaw tightened just slightly. "I'm handling it." The same word again. Handling. Like everything about this was under control. Like I was the only unpredictable part. I took a step. Closer. "Handling what?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me. Calm. Measured. Waiting for me to back down. That's when something shifted again. Not in him. In me. Because I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even a disagreement. It was a decision. He had decided what was happening. He had decided what I needed to know. And he had decided what I didn't. And for a moment, I understood how easy it would have been to believe him, to accept the explanation, to let it stop there. Because everything around him supported the story. The clean house, the calm voice, the controlled answers. It all looked normal. Except it wasn't. Because normal doesn't leave shoes behind. Normal doesn't move money without explanation. Normal doesn't erase 3 days from a calendar. I looked at him for a long moment. Really looked. And what I saw wasn't panic. It wasn't fear. It was control. Careful. Intentional. And completely unshaken. That was when I knew too. Things. He wasn't going to tell me the truth. And he didn't think I could find it without him. He was wrong. I didn't argue. I didn't push further. I just nodded once. Like I had accepted it. Like I was stepping back. Because sometimes the only way forward is to stop letting someone see where you're going. I turned toward the door. "You should trust me on this," he said. Quietly. I didn't answer. I just left. And the moment I stepped outside, the air felt different. Clearer. Because now it wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a pattern. And patterns can be followed. Teep. I didn't go home. Not yet. Because if I did, I knew I'd start thinking in circles again. Replaying his words. Second-guessing what I had seen. And I couldn't afford that anymore. I drove instead. Not to a place I had planned, but to a place that made sense. The name he gave me. The facility. I typed it into my phone while sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store. Nothing. No website. No listing. No registration. I tried variations of the name. Different spellings, different cities. Still nothing. That was the third shift. Because now it wasn't just suspicion. It was confirmation. He hadn't just avoided telling me the truth. He had replaced it with something that didn't exist. I leaned back in my seat and stared at the screen. For a moment, everything went quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the house. It was inside my head, because now I understood something I hadn't wanted to say out loud. This wasn't about care. It wasn't about confusion. It wasn't even about control. It was about hiding. I opened the bank app on my phone. Not hers, mine. Because I needed to think through this step by step. If someone wanted to move money without drawing attention, they wouldn't do it all at once. They'd do it gradually. Structured. Careful. I went back to what the woman on the phone had said. Transfers. Plural. Recent. That meant timing mattered. And timing leaves patterns. I pulled up the notes I had taken earlier. Dates. Amounts. They didn't look random. They looked spaced. Deliberate gaps. Just enough to avoid triggering anything. Obvious. But not enough to disappear completely. I zoomed in on one date, then another, then a third, and suddenly it lined up. Not with the house, not with his story, but with something else. A second location. A place where she could exist without being seen as herself. I searched nearby care centers. Not the big ones, the smaller ones, the ones that don't advertise, the ones that don't ask too many questions. One of them matched the timing. Not the name he gave me. A different one. Similar structure, similar capacity, different identity. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want. Warning. I just drove. The building was smaller than I expected. Plain, quiet, the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. I parked across the street for a minute. Watched. The entrance. People came in, people left. No urgency, no chaos. Just routine. Which somehow made it worse. Because if she was inside, she had been placed into someone else's routine, without choosing it. I crossed the street and walked in. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant. Soft lighting, muted voices. The front desk sat just inside the entrance. A woman looked up. Briefly. Can I help you? I'm here to see my mother, I said. What name? I gave her my mom's real name. She typed it in. Waited. Then shook her head. I'm sorry. We don't have anyone here by that name. I expected that, so I didn't react. I just nodded slightly, then gave her the second name, the one tied to the transfers, the one that didn't belong to her. This time, the woman paused, looked at the screen again. Her posture changed just enough for me to notice. Then she nodded. She's in room 12. Room 12. The number felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than just a location. Down the hall, she added. I thanked her and started walking. Each step felt slower, not because I was unsure, because I was, but because I knew once I opened that door, there would be no going back to not knowing. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, doors on either side, closed, quiet, routine. Everything about it was designed to feel normal. That was the point. Make it look like care. Make it feel like safety, even if it wasn't. I stopped in front of the door marked 12. My hand hovered over the handle for a second. Then I opened it. She was sitting by the window. Still. Quiet. Wearing a bracelet. Not hers. A name printed clearly across. It. Not hers. Her hair was brushed. Her clothes were clean. Everything about her looked managed. Except her eyes. She looked up slowly. Not startled, not confused. Just aware. Like she had been waiting. Not for rescue, for recognition. I stepped into the room, closed the door behind me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said her name, her real name, softly. She blinked once. Then again, and something shifted in her expression. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Enough to know she was still there. And she knew I was, too. I didn't rush to the court the next day. That's what people expect. That's what movies teach you. Find the truth. Expose it immediately. But real things don't work like that. Real things require patience and proof. I sat in my car outside that facility for a long time after I saw her, watching the door, watching who came in, who left, trying to understand how something like this could exist so quietly, because that was the part that stayed with me the most. Not what he did, but how easily it could have worked. If I had listened, if I had stopped asking questions, if I had believed him just a little bit more. She would still be there, under the wrong name, in the wrong place, living inside someone else's decision. I went home that night, but I didn't sleep. I gathered everything I had: notes, dates, call logs, the bank activity, every detail I could hold on to. Because now it wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was about building something that couldn't be ignored. The next morning, I made 3 calls, one to the bank, one to a legal office, and one to request records from the facility. I didn't tell my brother, not yet, because for the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was preparing, and preparation changes everything. The bank confirmed the pattern: transfers made under authorized access. Consistent, structured. Too consistent to explain. Away. The legal office asked simple questions. Who had control? Who had access? Who had made the decisions? The answers were simple. 2. And they all pointed in one direction: him. The facility records took longer, but when they came, they didn't leave room for interpretation. Admission under a different name, authorization signed, dates that matched the transfers, everything aligned, cleanly, too cleanly, because when something is real, it's messy. This wasn't messy, it was constructed, carefully, and that made it fragile, because constructed things fall apart when you look at them closely enough. The court hearing wasn't dramatic, no raised voices, no sudden revelations, just documents, placed one after another, transfers, signatures, records, each one narrowing the space he had to stand on. My brother sat across from me, still calm, still controlled. But something had changed. It was small, almost invisible. But it was there. The first crack, because control depends on being believed. And he wasn't anymore. When the judge spoke, it wasn't emotional. It was precise. Control revoked, access removed, authority reassigned, just words. But those words changed everything. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Afterward, I didn't go to him. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say, because the truth had already done what words couldn't. I walked out of that courtroom alone, but I didn't feel alone. I didn't felt clear. And clarity is something you don't notice until you have it. I drove back to the facility one last time, signed the papers, used her real name, the one that belonged to her, not the one someone else had given her. They brought her out slowly, carefully, like she was fragile. She wasn't. She had survived something she never chose. That's not fragility. That's endurance. I helped her into the car, closed the door gently, and for a moment, I just stood there, looking at the building, because it looked the same as before. Quiet, normal, unremarkable. And that was the part that stayed with me. How something could look so ordinary and still hold something so wrong. I got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove home. The house felt different when we walked in together. Not paused anymore, not empty, just present. I guided her to the chair by the table, the same one she always used. Her shoes still sat beside it, exactly where they had been. She looked at them for a moment, then at me, and something in her expression softened. Not confusion, not fear. Recognition, quiet, real. And that was enough. Not everything was fixed, not everything was restored, but the part that mattered was back where it belonged. Because she didn't wander. She didn't forget. She didn't leave. She was taken. And now, she was home.